What are some of the benefits of charitable bequests? What are the reasons we do it other than, well, James, you said it makes us feel good. Isn't that good enough? Well, sometimes. But as lawyers and as estate planners, we want to make sure that there's also an impact that helps you with regard to your estate, right? Whether it's an income tax deduction or it's an estate tax deduction or reduction. Those are positive things, and those are things that we look for when we're drafting an estate. And so some of the benefits of charitable bequests are, first, there's an estate tax deduction that you get for making charitable bequests through your estate. So we talked a lot about estate taxes over the 37 episodes or whatever we've got of this podcast so far. In Washington, we have a very low exemption, $2.193 million per person, which is, if you think about it, very low with our property values and if you've worked a long career and all that stuff and saved well.
You are listening to the Legacy Talk podcast hosted by James A. Jones,
attorney at law and founder of Sound Legacy Law, PLLC in Tacoma.
Attorney Jones is here to talk about how to best protect your family, assets, and wealth. Pulling stories from his more than 20 years of helping families and business owners protect their assets, create their estate plans, preserve their wealth, and plan for the future. Nobody wants to think about estate planning, but life has a way of sneaking up on you, and at any moment, something unexpected could happen that will leave you regretting not having acted sooner. So join Attorney James A. Jones in the Legacy Talk podcast, and together learn how to plan for your future today and have peace of mind tomorrow.
Welcome to Legacy Talk. I'm your host, James Jones. I'm an estate planning and probate attorney in Tacoma, Washington. I've been practicing for over 20 years, and my main practice areas include estate planning, probate, and estate administration. On Legacy Talk, we discuss topics surrounding families and estates. Estate planning can often be a confusing and complicated topic, but my goal with this podcast is to make it understandable and accessible to those who need it. So if this is something that interests you, I'd appreciate if you click the subscribe button and like this episode so that you can follow along as we break down the barriers to estate planning. As always, I'm excited to get to today's topic. Today's topic is charitable bequests. Crafting a philanthropic legacy. Because charitable giving is an important way to make an impact in the causes that we support during our lifetimes, as well as create a legacy for when we pass away. So, on today's show, we're talking about charitable bequests, crafting a philanthropic legacy. So let's get to it. Charitable giving is important. It's a part of what it means to be an American. The United States is consistently considered one of the most charitable countries in the world. And according to CEO Magazine, this year, 2024, they named it the most charitable country in the world. Some other publications didn't, I found, but it was interesting. But according to this magazine, 61% of Americans donated to charities, 72% of Americans helped strangers, and 42% of Americans volunteer their time to charities. So a majority of people in this country are charitable, right? And give to charity. During their lifetimes, they help with charities. They help strangers in need. That's good, right? That's what it means to be American, is to help others. And so charitable giving, because it's such a big part of our lives during our lifetime, should also be considered a bigger part of our estate plans. And so charitable giving can have an impact on our estate plans in the form of income tax and estate tax savings, as well as creating a personal philanthropic legacy for you and your family. Plus, it makes you feel good, right? It always makes you feel good to help and to serve and to give, in my experience. Hopefully that's something that you agree with in your life. And I know most people that are thinking about estate planning are thinking about longevity. They're thinking about legacy. They're thinking about what their impact in this world is for their family and those around them. And charitable giving and service are a great way to help make that happen. So today we're going to talk about the benefits of charitable giving with regard to your estate plan and how you create a charitable legacy going forward. And I've got a really good in the news, something good segment today that actually really fit for this episode, so I'm excited to get to that. But let's get to the main section here today. What is a charitable bequest? Okay, so in estate planning, we make bequests in our wills or trust, right? A bequest is basically a gift through your will or trust to someone, a gift of something to someone, right? I give my diamond ring to my granddaughter, Abigail. I don't know. They can include money, real estate, stocks, other valuable items, and there's a specific provision that designates it. So there's a charitable bequest, is bequest in your will to or a trust to a charity. And so the impact of a charitable bequest is that they allow individuals to support causes that they care about and make an impact when they're gone, and also supporting these charities, right? Helping them expand and sustain their mission, right? And so when we make these gifts and bequests, we're actually supporting those that we like, right? Giving them funds necessary to carry on and making an impact, hopefully. And by making these charitable bequests, we're inspiring others, usually those within our circles, our family and our friends. If they see that we're giving to charity or donating our time and money to causes that we like and we support, our legacy could be passed on to those others to carry on as well. They'll see the impact that has in our life, that good service feeling that we get when we do something good for others, and they would want that feeling too. And so hopefully they would consider at that point doing charitable work during their lifetime as well as part of their estate plan. So there's different types of charitable bequests. You can do it in many different types of ways, right? You can do a specific bequest like we just talked about. I give $10,000 to the American Red Cross as an example, right? The good thing about a specific bequest, well, I'll back up. You can also do a percentage bequest. Then we'll go through the good things, okay? A specific bequest is I'm giving you a certain amount of money or a certain item. Another kind of bequest you can do is a percentage bequest. I give 15% of my estate to the American Red Cross. You can also give a residuary bequest. And a residuary bequest is anything that's left that I've got goes to that charity, okay? I give the remainder of my estate after any other bequests to the American Red Cross. And then you can also do a contingent bequest, okay? So if something happens, then I do this, right? So an example might be, if my spouse doesn't survive me, I give my entire estate to the American Red Cross or whatever, right? And so here's some things to think about with these bequests, okay? The specific bequest, there's two that I think are the better bequests, okay? The specific bequest saying I give a certain amount of money, a specific amount of money to a specific charity is probably the simplest. And the reason why is if you say I'm giving $10,000 to the American Red Cross, you know what the American Red Cross is expecting you to get? $10,000, right? So there's really they're not going to be looking into the estate. They're not going to be asking for inventories and accountings. They're going to say, okay, $10,000, check the box, we got it. That's enough. We don't need to see anything else. With a percentage bequest, when you say, I'm going to give 15% of my estate to the Red Cross or Doctors Without Borders or St. Jude Children's Hospital, right? Then you're giving a certain percentage, which has to be calculated. And the majority of these charities want to make sure that they're getting the proper amount. And they've got lawyers and accountants on their teams to make sure that they're getting what they're supposed to get. And so a percentage bequest often requires a full accounting inventory of assets to the charity and potentially more hoops to jump through to make sure that they're actually getting what they're supposed to get. They vet it much more than a specific bequest would. So if you want it to be simpler for your beneficiaries, then a percentage bequest isn't always the right thing to do. The residuary bequest is probably the second easiest just because, well, if there's anything left, give it to the St. Jude's or whatever. And so they'll probably want an inventory and they'll want an accounting, but they're not going to nitpick the percentage, right? They're not going to nitpick, well, I didn't get this penny, because they're going to get the rest, right? And then a contingent bequest can be any of those, right? A contingent bequest can be, if so-and-so survives me, don't give them the $10,000, or if so-and-so doesn't survive me, give $10,000 to this charity. Or it could be, if so-and-so doesn't survive me, give 15% to this charity. Or if so-and-so doesn't survive me, give everything I've got to the charity. So the contingent bequest can be either specific or percentage or residual. Anyway, that's my thought on it. I think typically when I meet with clients and they're not going to give like their whole estate to a beneficiary that's a charity, I typically recommend doing a specific bequest just for simplicity and to make it easier on their executor trustees. So what are some of the benefits of charitable bequests? What are the reasons we do it other than, well, James, you said it makes us feel good. Isn't that good enough? Well, sometimes. But as lawyers and as estate planners, we want to make sure that there's also an impact that helps you with regard to your estate, right? Whether it's an income tax deduction or it's an estate tax deduction or reduction. Those are positive things, and those are things that we look for when we're drafting an estate. And so some of the benefits of charitable bequests are first, there's an estate tax deduction that you get for making charitable bequests through your estate. So we talked a lot about estate taxes over the 37 episodes or whatever we've got of this podcast so far. In Washington, we have a very low exemption, $2.193 million per person, which is, if you think about it, very low with our property values and if you've worked a long career and all that stuff and saved well. So if you give to charity, you get a dollar for dollar deduction in your taxable estate. So for example, if your estate is worth, we'll talk about Washington terms, okay? So your estate's worth $3 million, and you have a $3 million estate, but you gave $1 million away to charity when you died. That would be a $1 million deduction. So you'd go from having a $3 million estate to a $2 million estate, which would subject you or not subject you to having to even file a tax return if you're $2 million. So that would be a benefit, right? So you get a dollar for dollar deduction. And there's also the personal fulfillment. You can derive satisfaction, right? For an estate purpose, the main function is estate tax deduction. We'll get to some other benefits later in this episode that can be gained now during your lifetime before you go. And the other thing that you have impact-wise or benefit-wise is you're impacting society in the way that you want to impact it. A lot of the times we think like we're powerless to make change. We think maybe the political parties are, and elected officials are the only ones that can actually do anything good or bad around here. But those of us who can make charitable gifts during lifetime or provide charitable service, give your time, or give gifts when you're gone, have an impact on society, right? You can help with community projects, help societal issues, right? Create change through your service and through your giving. And so I think that gives us some control on the community that we live in. The more that we are able to give and contribute charitably in that way can really impact the society that we live in and our local communities. Okay, so if you want to make charitable bequests or gifts through your estate plan, most people I should say, know who they're going to give their money to, right? They know which charities they like. I really like St. Jude's. I like, the Red Cross, I guess, or Habitat for Humanity, or Humane Society is a popular one. Like, animal charities are very popular because people love their animals, as do I. Also, places like St. Jude's Children's Research Hospital is an excellent charity. I'm not advocating one over the other, but there's some that are really good and do really great work, right? And so you want to choose the charity. First of all, you want to make sure that the charity that you choose is aligned with your values, right? You want to make sure your personal values are reflected in the work that this charity does. And if it's meaningful to you, think about things like education or healthcare, environmental causes, the arts, where a lot of government funding is going away for the arts, so charitable giving for the arts is more important. But do your due diligence, right? You don't want to go with the popular one that everybody's giving to this one. It must be great, right? There's been reports that charities mismanage their funds. They pay their directors exorbitant amounts of money, right? You might not want to do that unless there's a real good reason for that director to make millions of dollars a year. So research the charities, okay? There's financial health and transparency and accountability websites, tools like Charity Navigator, and there's a Wise Giving Alliance with the Better Business Bureau that you can look up certain charities and they score them. And they talk about their mission and their needs and what happens to the money and those kinds of things, right? And then probably the best thing to do, especially if you're talking about a local charity or a charity that has a local branch or affiliate, is to engage with them directly yourself, right? And hopefully you're able to do that in your community and build relationships with people that work there and sort of get yourself enmeshed within the causes that charity is supporting. And so you can work during your lifetime, and when you pass a donation like that would be potentially even more impactful and more meaningful to you and probably to your family. And so talk to them yourself, volunteer, give your time. And so, okay, how do we structure this bequest? We talked about the types of bequests, right? Specific bequests, percentage, residual, contingent. How do we structure it? So we want to make sure, first of all, that when we make a charitable bequest in our will or our trust, that it's very clear and concise, right? Language-wise. We need to specify the full legal name of the charity. We want to put their address in there. We want to put their tax ID number there, because these charities are what is called a 501c3 organization typically, which is exempt from tax, a charitable organization. So you get a deduction, but you want to make sure you're identifying the proper one. There's lots of charities and they have lots of different names, but they're sometimes not that different, right? So if you're ambiguous, your bequest might fail, okay? And it could be misinterpreted. Well, they meant this place or that place, right? A lot of religious bequests to religious organizations sometimes can be confusing because there's a lot of different churches that have very similar names. And so you want to make sure the address is there, tax ID number for sure. Because if you are ambiguous or it is misinterpreted, then your goal is not being accomplished. So for example, you'd want to put your bequest like this. I give $50,000 to the Nature Conservancy, a nonprofit organization located at tax ID number, right? And usually what I do in those bequests, I also put in the Nature Conservancy or its successor, right? Because sometimes these charities merge with other charities. And so we want to make sure that if the charity's gone or it's merged with something else, that the money still gets there, right? And if it did merge and you don't want it to be going to that place, you want to look at that and update it, probably change it, okay? And so the best way to do this is through an attorney, of course. As an estate planning attorney, I advocate using an estate planning attorney to do your estate plan. You want to make sure that the language is correct and clear and non-ambiguous and not subject to misinterpretation. And so that's important, right? That's important. Okay, so when we're doing our estate planning, we want to talk to our family about this. We want to talk about those that are going to be in charge a lot of the time. And if we're creating a philanthropic legacy, we want to openly communicate with those that are going to be helping you fulfill this legacy, right? You want to discuss your charitable intentions with your family to avoid misunderstandings and gain their support in your charitable endeavors, right? And this prevents conflicts potentially and ensures that everyone knows your wishes, okay? And when you're dealing with charitable bequests, and everybody has their own idea as to what's the most important thing to do or what's the best thing to do with regard to their family. Sometimes families with estranged family members give shares of their estate that would have gone to an estranged family member to a charity, or if they cut everybody out, they give everything to charity a lot of the time. A balanced approach is typically the most beneficial. And so you have to consider the needs of your family members, your beneficiaries, whether they're children or nieces and nephews or friends or other family, and consider, well, if I give this much to charity, will they be negatively impacted? That's something to consider, right? And you can also set up plans, and we'll talk about that in a minute, to give some money to your family and give remainder amounts to charity. So we'll talk about that in a second. And then involve kids and family members and beneficiaries to the extent appropriate in the decision-making process, right? Sometimes that act that says, hey, well, let's go serve at the soup kitchen or whatever, right? Or at the food bank, right? That can sort of bring the spirit of charitable giving and philanthropic endeavors to your family, specifically younger children, right? And so including them in the planning and in the selection of these charities and then the actual charitable work is a significant benefit. Okay, so you can make these types of charitable bequests in any kind of estate document, right? A will or a trust, okay? You don't have to have a specific type of trust to make a charitable bequest. But there are types of trusts that are specifically related to charitable purposes, okay? There's a trust called a charitable remainder trust, where the donor transfers assets into the trust and in exchange for income during their lifetime, with the remainder going to charity. So say, for example, you have a piece of property, like a rental property, that generates income, and you say, I'm going to put this into a charitable remainder trust, and I'm going to say the rest of it goes to the Boys and Girls Club when I die. But during my lifetime, for 10 years or 15 years or whatever the actuarial time limit is required in that trust, says it pays you income. Okay, so part of that rent or something. And so once that period is over, the charity, the Boys and Girls Club in this situation, would get the house, and then they would get the rental income. Okay. There's another type of trust called a charitable lead trust, and where this is related to where the charity receives income for a period of time and the remainder goes to the donor's heirs. So it's the same situation potentially as you put this rental property in a charitable lead trust and it pays the charity income over a period of years. And after that period is expired, the rental property goes to the kids or money or whatever, right? And so that's another way to do it. And there's other options, but those are two of the most common options for charitable giving. So let's talk about this. This is about the balance. This is about lifetime versus gifts at death or bequests, right? Lifetime giving versus bequests at death. Lifetime giving allows you to make an immediate impact and see the impact of those contributions. I should say this if you're watching. Your eyes are bugging out. I see it. They can witness the impact and engage with the charity. During your lifetime, I tease this, the tax advantages or tax benefits of giving to charity during your lifetime is you can get an income tax deduction for part of that gift. So that reduces your income taxes, which is always a good thing. And so that's an immediate tax deduction, which is positive. And like we mentioned before, you can do both. You can give during your lifetime and you can give at your death. So consider that. But I think the lifetime giving, like I've mentioned, really gives you the opportunity to impact those around you and those who look to you as an example, to your family and friends, as someone that's doing good, right? The next thing to consider is legacy and recognition. Charitable bequests can create a legacy that reflects the donor's values, passions, and continuing their influence beyond their lifetime. And many ways that you can do this is through a naming opportunity. So you can say, well, I'd like to set up a scholarship for this school, right? Or I'd like to, I don't know, most people don't do this. You could have a building named after you or something, right? If you've been to a college campus, you know why those buildings have those names, typically because they've had that money donated by that family or that person, okay? Many charities offer recognition for significant bequests, like naming a building or naming something, a program, a scholarship, a fund, right? Scholarships are a lot easier to get. I have a client whose father or grandfather, I believe, set up a scholarship at Duke University that he's still giving to as part of his estate plan. And so it's specifically named so-and-so's scholarship, which is pretty cool. And you can also set up an honorary fund. You can do a donor advised fund that goes to specific charities. You can create foundations, things like that, which are too deep for getting into for this podcast's purposes, but there's lots of options other than those two trusts that I mentioned earlier. And of course, with any estate plan, you want to make sure you're up to date on things, especially if these charities change. A lot of the time things change with charities, and maybe you don't like how they're managing it. Maybe they have new directors or new ways of governance that you don't want to have your money go to. Maybe you don't want to support that anymore. Maybe there's someone else that's doing it better and cheaper, but making an impact. So you want to make sure that's something that you stay aware of. And you also want to make sure that you're staying aware of the tax laws and how the charitable bequests can be impacting your estate or your income. They've, over the years, tried to reduce the ability for people to deduct charitable contributions, which I think is a bad thing. Hopefully that doesn't continue. So I've been doing this over 20 years. I've had a lot of clients make charitable bequests, right? And one client was an older lady who was very active in her community, and she had a large estate. And so one of the benefits of charitable giving is that deduction, right? That deduction that you get when you give your money to charity, that dollar for dollar deduction. So in her case, we set up a foundation, which is like a charity of her own, that benefits other charities. So it's a private foundation which is set up and can receive donations and collect money and raise money for different charities that it can support. And this foundation can be managed by family and friends or trusted people in your life. And so this client of mine set up a foundation which creates scholarships and other opportunities for people that are disadvantaged in one way or another to go to do certain programs, to go to college, things like that. And so there's really a big impact that you can make on those in your community, particularly if you have a large estate, a significant estate, like this one gal. So in that case, she's making a legacy during her lifetime, and she's also getting a significant benefit when she passes, because the majority of her assets are going to go to this charity, this private foundation that she established. And so her legacy will live on. Her name is on the foundation, and her husband, her late husband. So it's a good thing. So I teased that we have something good which is directly related to this episode, which I wasn't necessarily looking for, but it fell into my lap. And I like these something good stories, and this is in the news as well because it's contemporaneous with doing this episode. World's most popular YouTuber builds 100 homes for South Americans in disaster areas. Many of you have heard of Mr. Beast, and if you have kids or teenagers, you've heard of Mr. Beast. In a video entitled "I Built 100 Houses and Gave Them Away," the world's most popular YouTuber continued to demonstrate that his channel is far more than crazy videos. James Donaldson, aka Mr. Beast, has 300 million subscribers, and they tune in to watch him do crazy stunts, like crazy stuff. Like, he gives away a lot of stuff, but he does crazy stuff. Crazy things like shredding a $500,000 Lamborghini, hiring a real assassin to try to hunt him down. But the revenue of these videos doesn't just cover filming expenses and pay to have for him to have massive houses and cars and all this stuff. He spent millions and millions in philanthropic causes. He's even got a charity called Beast Philanthropic, which is a series on his channel, I believe. He's taking that to Central and South America. He targeted areas where natural disasters have left people homeless. In Jamaica, a family living in a rural mountainous area lost their home in a landslide. They got a new modern home, as did another family whose house was flooded every time there were heavy rains. In El Salvador, Mr. Beast paid for the construction of row housing a safe distance from a river that had recently flooded and washed a small community away. He also built a soccer pitch for the kids to play on and paid for brand new soccer equipment, shirts, and cleats for all of the kids. At that point, he was at 50 houses. Okay. In Argentina, he and his partners transformed 15 structures in low-income housing areas into ones that were more comfortable, weather-resistant, and had all the basic amenities necessary. By the time he had finished doing the same in Mexico, he'd been given up to 83 houses. In Colombia, in an area that had been dismantled by tornadoes, 17 families got new furnished homes. And this is just the latest installment of Mr. Beast's philanthropic activities, some of which go to projects on his subchannel, which is a subchannel, Beast Philanthropy. He's dug wells for villages in Africa, helped thousands of kids and young people get cochlear implants, and held several massive fundraisers for feeding families, constructing solar power stations, etc. So, Mr. Beast is a good dude, I think. He does good work. And he's using his fame and his popularity become involved in philanthropic activities. And I think especially his audience is like teenagers, right? Probably. Young teens and teenagers. And they're seeing that this guy, this crazy dude, with these crazy friends that follow him around and have them keep their hand on the car so they can get this car or whatever, or survive on an island or whatever. You know, he's got crazy stuff. Anyway, they can see that, right? And that's a good example for them. And uses his money and impact to make an impact for those less fortunate. So that's something good. Nice job, Mr. Beast. That's it. That's it for today's episode. Thanks for listening to today's episode of Legacy Talk. If you liked today's episode and would like to learn more, please like and subscribe for more great content. I've been your host, James Jones. It's your legacy.
Thank you for listening to the Legacy Talk podcast by attorney James A. Jones. If you found today's episode helpful, we ask that you like and follow us on all major platforms so you don't miss out on the latest episode. If you have questions for Attorney Jones, reach out at info@joneslegacylaw.com or visit our website at joneslegacylaw.com. Join us again next week for another episode of the Legacy Talk podcast.